here from the book of Matthew. So Matthew chapter 4, Jesus has recently gone through his temptation in the wilderness that we've talked about before. He's fasted for 40 days. He's been off in the wilderness by himself, tempted of the devil, and combating him with Scripture at every turn. Obviously winning the ultimate battle. And now he has begun his ministry here on earth. We think about Jesus, and as we read the Scriptures, it seems like, you know, the story just must span decades and decades and decades and generations. But Jesus' ministry on earth was just really confined to a space of 3 years. You think about that and all of the things that we learn as we study the life and the ministry of Jesus Christ. There's so much there for us to practically apply as we seek to follow him. And we follow him because he is worthy of following. And so we come to this text that's perhaps familiar to you. Maybe this is one of the passages in the Bible that you've read the most. You know how it goes, right? You commit yourself to a new reading program maybe at the start of the year, and you're going to start in the book of Matthew, and you're going to be faithful, and you're going to read the Bible every day, and you get at least through chapter 4, right? Before things kind of get busy and maybe you taper off a little bit in your commitment to reading. But I'm sure you've read this before, but this is the story of when Jesus calls the first of his 12 disciples. And I love it. Perhaps you have followed The Chosen, that movie series or TV series, whatever you want to call it, streaming series, I guess is the right lingo for today. I hope you're streaming. I hope you're not old school just watching like TV. But it's a great thing. Now, it's a Hollywood production, I get that, and they take creative liberties with some things, but I love what The Chosen does to the gospel, to the Bible. It brings the humanity into it. And so we read here, beginning in verse 18 of Matthew 4, here's what the Bible says. While walking by the Sea of Galilee, he, that's Jesus, saw two brothers, Simon, who was called Peter, and Andrew, his brother, and they were casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. Immediately, well, first this, he said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." And immediately they left their nets, and they followed him. And going on from there, he saw two other brothers, James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother, in the boat with Zebedee, their father. They were also fishermen, and they were mending their nets. And Jesus called them, and immediately they left the boat and their father, and they followed him. They followed him. Some of you in here would describe yourself as leaders. And as I look around and see the congregation in front of me, I could point out many of you that I see that I would say, yes, they are leaders. They're leaders in their home. They're leaders on the job. They're leaders in this church. We all want to be a leader. The harder task is being a devoted follower. But I would argue this with you this morning, not for very long, but I would argue this, that the key to effective leadership is devoted followership. We all follow something. We all follow someone. The question this morning that you need to wrestle with is this: who or what are you following? Who or what are Are you following? Of course, the Sunday school answer that we might be tempted to give is, well, of course, Mick, I'm following Jesus. And I hope today that that's the case. I hope that those are not just words that roll off your lips because it's what you expect that people want to hear from you. I hope that your followership of Jesus is more than words. I hope that it bears itself out in the way that you live your life. And if he, in fact, is the most worthy, then your following can be genuine and sincere. At the beginning of this series, we talked about the essence of worship. By now, you should have these ideas sort of taking shape or maybe being cemented in your mind. Three things. First, description. We ascribe worth to the thing that we worship. Secondly, surrender. We surrender ourselves. We surrender to the one who is worthy of our worship. And then thirdly, we respond. And so as we look at this text, the brief text that we read, and we see in Andrew and Peter and James and John, these first men that Jesus has called to follow them, we see these three things: the description, the surrender, and the response. And so let's just briefly look at those together before we draw some application for us. First, the description. To these first disciples, Jesus and the invitation to follow him was more valuable than some things that were a part of their life. First, it was more valuable to them to follow Jesus than it was to continue the task that was at hand. You say, how do you know that, man? Well, I know because they just dropped everything and left and followed. They ascribed more worth to Jesus and following him than they did to the task at hand. I mean, they were fishermen. There were fish to catch and to subsequently sell in the market. This was the work that they had to do. This was the living that they had to make. But they saw Jesus and following Jesus as a thing that was more valuable than that. That's pretty impressive, if you think about it. The other thing they saw Jesus and the invitation to follow as more valuable than is this. They saw it as more valuable than the security and the comfort of what was known. Fishing was a comfortable space for these guys. Now, it wasn't easy. It was hard work, fishing. It was dirty work. Right? Like dirty jobs. Maybe there would have been an episode on this. I don't know. It certainly wasn't glorious work. I mean, these people didn't get the write-ups in the local paper. They didn't get featured on the evening news. Not for good things. This was a working class sort of endeavor. These men weren't rich. They weren't popular. But in it, somehow, they were comfortable. Why? Because it's what they knew. Every day, they get up, they do the same thing. Go fishing. That sounds good to some of you. But there were nets to be mended. There were fish to be processed and taken to market. And it wasn't glorious and it wasn't making them rich, but it was comfortable because it's what they knew. And when they decided to follow Jesus, they ascribed more worth to Jesus than they did to the comfort of what it is that they knew. That's important. And we'll apply it in just a second. So we see ascription. We see also surrender. The first disciples surrendered their vocation in the living that they were earning because of that vocation. Obviously, we just talked about that. Now, Jesus was clear in his intentions. In fact, he says to them, I want you to follow me because I want to make you fishers of men. There was a sense of surrender. And it could be this morning that God is calling you to do something. Maybe he's calling you into a new space, into a new endeavor, into a new way of living. Maybe he's calling you into a ministry that takes up more of your time and requires more sacrifice. I don't know what it is, but there's an element of surrender that is requisite if we are ascribing the word to the one that we should be following, and that's Jesus. Jesus' intent for us is that we participate in the kingdom. And for Peter and Andrew, the analogy was clearly understood. They were used to fishing for fish. They were used to casting a net and bringing fish in. And Jesus is like, well, let me just use something you understand. I want for you to cast the kingdom net and to draw souls to me, to bring men in for the kingdom. This is what Jesus is calling them to. But it's going to require that you surrender some things. And it wasn't that Peter and Andrew and James and John's fishing was completely without value. But Jesus was inviting them to a purposed life that had so much more significance. The investment in fishing for men would pay eternal kingdom dividends, but it required some surrender on their part. So they ascribed worth, they surrendered themselves, and then here's how they responded. This is not rocket science. They followed. They simply followed. You say, man, you studied all week to tell us what the Bible already says that they followed? Yes. Actually, that's a lie. I did not. I duck hunted at the first part of the week, and then I deer hunted at the end of the week. And then it dawned on me when I got up this morning that I have to preach. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Don't email the elders. It's a joke. It's a joke. We make the response pretty complicated sometimes. Like, let's make a deal, God. Here's what I hear you asking, but let's negotiate. I'll do this if you will. Or how about not full-time, but... No, they simply followed. That was their response. Jesus' invitation was very simple. He said, follow me. Follow me. And the response from the disciples was equally as simple. Why do we complicate things? Why is it our tendency towards complexity? Why is that? You know, when we tend toward complexity, what happens is we pave the way for our ultimate faithlessness. It's like I need to make things more complex, so somehow I feel like I can figure out in my mind what it is that I'm supposed to be doing, rather than trusting that God, when he says, follow me, knows where we're going. For the disciples that Jesus called, there was no status that had to be attained. I mean, Jesus wasn't looking at their resumes and qualifications and saying, hey, yeah, this guy would be good, this guy not so much. There were no prerequisites to be fulfilled. Were these guys perfect? They are fishermen. I'll bet they had some salty language. They weren't perfect. But listen, perfection is not a prerequisite. You say, well, I can't serve God because I'm just not quite there. I'm not perfect like you. Well, you apparently haven't talked to Jill. But listen, perfection's not a prerequisite. I'll tell you what perfection is. It's an eternal promise. Because when Jesus saves me in my imperfect state, his righteousness, his perfection gets applied to my account. And someday when he returns, I will be glorified and perfected and made complete in him. But not now. Man, if perfection was a prerequisite, you and I'd be out. Especially some of you. Not making any eye contact there. Were these guys well educated and equipped? No, they were Galileans who were understood generally to be uneducated. In fact, they had their own kind of lingo, like they couldn't speak the language. I almost said English, but I don't think any of them spoke English back then. It's kind of like today, nobody really speaks English today either, I guess. They weren't educated men, they weren't really very well equipped. I mean, they had some nets, but even those needed mending. Listen, when Jesus calls you to follow him, he doesn't say, hey, grab those tools. Hey, grab those skill sets. You've got to have those. Man, go to Bible college for 26 years and get some education, and then you'll be ready to serve. He doesn't say any of that. When God calls us to something, he equips us to do the work that he's called us to. Now, that might mean education for you. That might mean special skills for you. If God called you to serve on the worship team, man, I hope he's giving you some musical ability. Otherwise, we're left with joyful noise, I guess. These guys weren't something special. They were regular dudes, just going about their business fishing. And Jesus came to them and he said, follow me, I've got better plans. And their response was, okay. And they followed. What does that mean for us? Let me ask you a question. Why is following Jesus so hard for us? You say, well, it's not for me. Okay, we'll talk about mine next week. It is hard to follow Jesus. Why is it? What makes it so hard to follow Jesus? I mean, he calls us to follow. Why do we struggle in our response? Why do we not, like these first disciples, just drop everything and go with him? Why is it so difficult for us? Can I suggest a few things? No? Well, I'm going to anyway. How about this? Following is a challenge because of fear. Men, we're afraid to follow. Maybe it is that you're afraid of the change that it will bring. You know, our fear is paralyzing. Have you noticed that? You ever been so fearful of something that you just felt stuck, like you couldn't move? Anybody? Yeah, I think we all get that feeling. It's a terrifying feeling, and I just don't feel like I can move forward or backward or side to side. I'm stuck. I'm paralyzed. Now, for some, even though the circumstance they find themselves in is a negative thing, or maybe it's a painful thing, or maybe it's even a dangerous thing, it feels safer to them than change. Like I'm not afraid of the danger I'm in my present circumstance that I know so well, but ask me to change, and man, I'm terrified of that. Maybe you've experienced that. We're addicted to what we call homeostasis, which is a big old fancy word that basically means the same old, same old. That's what I want. I don't want to change anything, right? We see this in church a lot. And for all these years, we've sung the same songs and the same number of verses, and we've got this routine, and the preacher preaches for 26 minutes every single time, and we get out, and I go eat at the same restaurant, in the same booth, I order the same thing. I go home and I sleep in the afternoon for the same amount of time. I sit in the exact same seat every week, and if somebody comes in that's visiting and sits in my seat, I have a bad attitude for a month. Now I'm preaching. We are so averse to change. And sometimes we refuse to follow Jesus Because we know He wants to change us. We know that He wants to change our hearts. We know that He might want to change our location. We know that He might change our life trajectory and our direction. He might change what we do with our lives. He might change everything about us, and that's terrifying to us. And so we don't follow.
Yeah.
Listen, you can cling to the illusion of homeostatic circumstance in your life. Or you can surrender yourself to the one who is the exact same today, yesterday, and forever. You're averse to change? Then why don't you tether yourself to Jesus, because He's not changing. We're afraid of change. Maybe we don't follow because we're afraid of what it might cost us. Man, I just got my life in order. My job's going so well. I've gotten a promotion. We're finally getting ahead materially and financially. I'm finally, able to order the things off Amazon that I've always wanted to order because I'm addicted to that. Man, life's good. I can just kind of relax and coast. I don't have to worry about things so much, man. I don't know if I'm willing to give that up to follow. There was a season in my life where I made a lot of money. Not because I'm really good at it. It's a family business. Did really well. Things were good. Things were easy. I didn't have to worry about the finances. But let me tell you, doing the Lord's work that doesn't pay quite as well as some of the things we might do in the world, nothing compares. You can have the hundreds of thousands of dollars in annual salary. Give me the joy of following Jesus. And what you have, in the comfort you're experiencing now, you may be afraid to give up because following Jesus just seems like it's not such a lucrative deal. Let me just encourage you. Drop your nets and follow. Now, does that mean if I'm following Jesus that I can't make a lot of money or that I can't have nice things? Not at all. I'm not that kind of person, not that kind of a preacher. I'm not telling you today that if you're going to follow Jesus, you need to just, sell it off, and what you can't sell, give to the, Goodwill, and just take the vow of poverty. Eat tuna fish and macaroni and cheese if you can afford it. I'm not saying you have to take a vow of poverty, but what I'm telling you is, if you're pursuing the things of this world and the comforts and the niceties and the amenities and the pleasures that we enjoy, especially here in America, and they have usurped God and taken His place on the throne of your heart, you will be a miserable person until you decide to give it up and follow Jesus. You remember the story in the Gospels of the rich young ruler who came to Jesus and said, "Hey, what do I have to do, Jesus, to be saved? What do I need to do to be a follower of yours, to be a disciple of yours?" And Jesus says, "Well, you need to keep the law and the commandments." And this guy's like, "Hey, I'm religious too. Man, I'm the whole package. All these things I've done, and I've kept these laws from my youth. What further things do I lack?" And Jesus said this. And this separated the men from the boys. He said, "Okay, then sell everything that you have and follow me." And what does the Bible say? It says that that young man went away sorrowful because he had great possessions, and he valued them more than he valued following Jesus. Maybe we don't follow because we're afraid of what it will cost, and maybe we're afraid of what people might think. Man, if the company I keep, if I do this Jesus thing, they're going to laugh at me. They're going to think ill of me. They may even not want to be a friend of mine anymore. If they don't want to be a friend then they were never a friend to you. Why not cling to the one whose friendship is closer than a brother? It's Jesus. We're fearful sometimes because we're afraid of what God may ask us to do or where He might ask us to go. It's like, man, God, I'm all in on the ministry thing. I'll be in the ministry for you, but man, I don't want to go to Africa. Earlier this week, we were in Missouri, which is kind of like Africa. And we were duck hunting the Castlemans, and I was along for the ride. Our guides down there were talking about the big snakes. Caden, if you need to plug your ears right now. We had a little fun with Caden. I'm not even sorry. I tried, buddy. No, but he was showing us pictures of these big copperheads and big cottonmouths that, they killed. And of course, we're in a pit blind that's in a swamp, sitting there, eating mostly because there wasn't a lot of ducks flying, but it's a good time. And all we could think about was the snakes. Man, don't take me to Africa, God. They got snakes there. They got spiders there. I can't do it. Man, don't call me to a country that's hostile to the gospel. Don't take me to a Muslim nation, God. I could die there. And maybe we're afraid of what it is that God might call us to do or where He might ask us to go. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. If God is calling you, He has already gone before you, and He promises that He will be with you. But we don't follow sometimes because we're afraid of that stuff. When we are following, our leader is always right there in front of us. The shepherd is never far from the sheep that are following. I tell you, the sheep He is far from. The ones who aren't following. Say, well, God feels like He's abandoned me. No, He hasn't. You stopped following. You're following something. You're following someone. Something or someone that you have deemed to be more worthy. So sometimes it's fear that keeps us from following. Sometimes it's pride. Sometimes we're too proud and selfish to follow. Sometimes we can't think of ourselves as anything but being in charge. Right? Well, I'm not a follower, I'm a leader, right? So, fall in. Let's go. Follow me, I don't know where I'm going. Right? Guys? You know what I hate? This is a confession. I may or may not be able to go home after church. Here's what I hate. When I pull directions up on Google Maps or iMaps, right? Some of you are already moaning. You feel my pain. And I put it on my dashboard, so I can see it and so that British lady can tell me where to go. Here's the part I hate. I look over and Jill's. She's looking up the directions on her phone. As though her maps are superior. Now, she comes from a family that regularly deleted their contacts on their iPhone. I'm technologically superior. I will leave until I need to look at her phone to see where we're going. We want to be in charge. And our pride tells us, you know what, I don't need anybody to follow. I can find my way. And sometimes our pride takes us to foolish extremes. And sometimes we attempt to disguise our pride and our refusal to follow. Right? We get passive-aggressive about it. The passive-aggressive types might say they are following. But interestingly enough, they're following from the front. How's that work? Right? Who's following me? You know, and then there's that guy out front. I am. This way. Pride. Some of you won't follow Jesus because you're too proud. That's just it. That's just a fact. Say, well, it'd be embarrassing if I acted like I didn't know where I was going or what I was doing with my life. No, that might be the exact humility you need to step into the greatness of the life that God has for you as you follow. And you're missing out because you're too proud. So sometimes we follow because we're fearful. Sometimes we don't follow because we're fearful. And we don't follow because we're pride. And sometimes we don't follow because we're distracted. We're too distracted by everything to follow. We're distracted by the things that we value more. I know you don't need me to tell you this, but I'm going to say it anyways. We tend to pursue the objects of our passion, right? This is a rule. We tend to follow the things we're passionate about. Man, the only exception I can think of maybe would be Bears fans. I don't know why you follow. I really don't. You play the Vikings today. I'm sorry. No, we pursue the things that we're passionate about, right? You love sports, you follow sports. You love a team, you follow the team. You love to pursue success in business, that's what you follow. You love to chase the deer and the ducks and the skunks or whatever it is you're out there hunting. You pursue it, you're passionate about it. You outfit yourself, you spend your money on it, you spend your time on it. It consumes you, it's your energy. And we follow all kinds of things, every little shiny object. And it seems like everything that we can follow in this life is characterized by this thing. When we die, it's done. The deer heads on the wall ain't going with you. The money in your bank account's not going with you. The bears will be terrible even after you're gone. We're distracted. We should be following Jesus, but, it's like, squirrel! We had one of our 1,400 feral cats get into our house yesterday. I thought I was going to have to call the elders and tell them that I'd been divorced. Joe was not excited by it. And apparently it had been in there for a whole night. Somehow the door had been left open. I'm out in the garage and Joe comes out. A cat just came racing down the stairs and I think it's in the bathroom. And so sure enough, I go in there and it's in the bathroom. And it's out of there, back up the stairs, and I couldn't find it upstairs. And so I found a pool noodle. And I'm under the bed, under the couch. And the thing darted out from behind the couch upstairs and went down the stairs, and Jill was sitting at the bar, and I heard this, no! She was distracted. I'm like, open the door! Get it out! I don't think she was thinking about following Jesus at that moment. But isn't it true? And you maybe make a commitment, maybe the Holy Spirit's convicting you, and you make a decision, you say, you know what, I'm going to follow Jesus more closely. I'm going to make the commitment to follow until something else better comes up. Until a better opportunity presents itself to you. We're so distracted. I can tell you this morning that following Jesus takes focus. Now, these guys drop their nets and they're like, okay, let's go. Well, listen, the next few years that they spent with Jesus were not easy. And I'm sure there were many times when they kind of maybe second-guessed their decision to follow and thought, I can just go back to the comfort of what I know, even though it's not really that great. I can just go back there. But they did not allow themselves to be distracted by that. They continued to follow. They were focused on their master, upon their Savior Jesus. Following Jesus requires sacrificing the things that seem good for now, like the immediate gratification type stuff, for the things that are great, that might be deferred. Life is hard. Life is full of hardship. Life is full of opposition. Life is full of distractions. But if we'll stay the course, the reward in all of eternity will be great. But you have to follow. You've got to follow. So as we conclude, you're going to follow what's most valuable. You're going to follow what's most valuable in your life. Is that Jesus? Have you ascribed worth to Jesus that you're not ascribing to other things? It's going to require that you surrender some things. It's going to require that you surrender to the change that may be a part of following Jesus. It inevitably will be a part of it. Are you willing to surrender? And will you simply respond in faith? Not intellectually, not like I got to figure this out. Let me type this into a spreadsheet, see what data pops out. If I should or shouldn't follow, will you just say yes? Jesus, I will follow, no matter what. Are you living like His Word?